Thank you, Sandy, and I'm following on with work in progress of my study of the British amateur brass quartet tradition. This really follows on chronologically, and today with my colleagues I'll present aspects of the music making until about 1930. Now, despite the potential of Mimar and Tolo, it was another venture that instigated a branch of amateur brass chamber music in Britain. But there are many instances of amateur groups playing in the communities from 1860s onwards. Now, just listen to this very short extract. I'll get to multitask here. It's a version of Henry Bishop's glee, "Foresters Sound the Cheerful Horn." That's good. Now then, the Foresters sounded the cheerful horn. It was a favourite, really, well into the 20th century with brass band quartets in concerts, records and radio broadcasts. But a more coherent quartet entity was triggered by Henry, known as Harry Round, of the Liverpool-based publisher Right and Round, and his contemporaries. Now, they promoted printed music that purposely served the many band players of modest abilities, and that would explain the simplicity of the style and the execution of this. Now, this phenomenon, it coincided with and in part caused a rapid expansion in British contesting, including those for soloists and quartets. Now, Harry Round, he was incredibly prolific. Now, his first set of original quartets dates 1885, and it really established a model. It was 4 miniatures, The Return of Spring, The Village Chimes, The Reaper's Chorus, and An Evening Prayer, presented on March-sized part books. Examining many of these things, they're nearly always 9 staves to each page. They're designed specifically for difficulty, challenge, and for length and so on. Now, I think largely maybe because of this, in the 1890s, local brass band quartet contests mushroomed. Now, by the turn of the 20th century, Right and Round marketed 10 sets. By 1914, they marketed 20 sets. Now, the first contest of this type, you can see it up. You can see it up here. But the very first one, I think, may have been held at Edge Hill, Liverpool. They certainly claimed it. Now, Edge Hill, Liverpool, it became a real hotspot for quartet contests. There were about 4 a year. And events were local, but a network grew bit by bit. And as the contest flourished, some of the organisers were ambitious. You can see in this one, it's a quartet competition of England. I think this really evokes honest aspiration more than national recognition. A national quartet contest really only emerged in the 1940s, but overall, the formats and the regulations of these contests mirrored corresponding full band events. Also, some contests had prizes for juvenile participation. Now, the new publications emerged in the new millennium to suit diverse tastes and purposes, and there is a very fine example. In 1902, Smith and Company's Champion Journal contained standard quartets for first-class contests and also quartets for second-class contests. Now, significantly, William Rimmer, At that point, he was a prominent cornetist, then a conductor and composer. He produced several quartets when he was the music editor of Richardson's Cornet Journal from 1897 through to 1905. Now, his selections from Weber's Preciosa and Freischütz, they were targeted at advanced players and remained popular for over 50 years. In parallel, Right and Round continued to promote accessible music, including a set including Home Sweet Home and The Ash Grove. It appears, however, that after Harry Round's death in 1905, the firm's productivity dropped off, but nonetheless it was a very competitive marketplace. Now, the front line of the brass band movement was radically reorganized in the first decades of the 20th century. The entrepreneur John Henry Iles, for example, he founded a national championship in 1900. He sort of introduced new original test pieces in 1913 and so on. Now, despite this period of change, contemporaneous solo and quartet contests, they were scarcely affected by these external factors. Clifford Bevan observed that democratic organizations fulfilled coordinating and promotional roles at a local level. Their functions, particularly regulation, were taken extremely seriously. This concurred with long-standing working-class traditions, and local bodies also acted as a middle ground between individual bands. Now, when Iles introduced Percy Fletcher's Labour and Love in 1913 as the first of a series of original test pieces for his national championship, his reform forced letting go of Rimmer, then editor of his publishing company, Smith & Company. Now, Rimmer had earned an outstanding reputation as a conductor in contests between 1905 and 9, as a composer of marches, for example, the Cossack, 1904, but his test pieces did not concur with the compositional methods and extended forms of Fletcher and Cyril Jenkins. Rimmer was expeditiously appointed chief editor of Right and Round, and in September, a set of original quartets emerged. Now, these were actually sort of composed on Round's model of miniatures. That was a thing that was still commercially strong, including a piece called Mountain Breezes. Now, the set was advertised recurrently throughout World War I, when many bands would have experienced seriously reduced attendance. Now, let's hear how Mountain Breezes sounded in 1914. That was members of Foden's band in 1914. Now, brass banding at that point, if we could have the next slide, if you please. Brass banding at this time was a way of life. This is another quartet from Foden's band. Foden's band had lots of quartets, really. This group, their occupation was apparently something called pot hunting, and there are some of the pots they collected on their travels. They got the the trophies and they got the prize money. The repertoire was really operatic selections, transcriptions of popular four-part songs and glees, works by Harry Round and William Rimmer, and quartets practiced after the full band sessions at the factory. Now, compared to Isles commissions for band of the 20s and 30s, especially pieces like Holst's A Moorside Suite, new original works for brass quartets were predominantly more provincial. Now, you heard Rimmer's Concordia of 1924 last night. Its brilliance and scope made it correspond with full band repertoire. Now, the next year, William Hollingsworth's O Harmony was a work advertised as suitable for average players, yet the quartet with which Black Dyke have won so many prizes. Now just listen to this short extract. I'll have to have a little stroll for this. I think you can consider that the hymn tune is in many ways the heart and soul of the brass band. Now, Hollingsworth, his dates were 1840 to 1905, was a working class composer from near Bradford. He produced over 500 hymns, and there was also a mass in the repertoire of Black Dyke Band in the 1890s. Now, in the repertoire, there were other originals by Hubert Bath and James Ord Hume. These perhaps enhanced rather than sustained a repertory with so many transcriptions and arrangements. Now, one real point of change came in 1924 because brass quartets broadcast on local radio stations that were components of the newly founded British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC. Now, Tyneside had a very strong band tradition, and the earliest quartet broadcasts include a programme given by the St Hilda's Brass Quartet. This band went semi-professional the next year because St Hilda's Colliery shut down. There was a lot of poverty. Its neighbour, Harton Colliery Quartet, broadcast a 30-minute local programme in 1926 almost certainly a moving occasion for regional listeners in the aftermath of an extended miners' strike. Now, its cornetist, Jack McIntosh, he migrated first from Sunderland to the south as a founding member of the BBC Symphony Orchestra from 1930 to 52. Soon, numerous quartets broadcast on regional and networked BBC radio from all quarters of Britain. Now, this is again a picture of a Foden's quartet, not much later. Now, another celebrated cornetist, Harry Mortimer, is second from the left there. He combined brass band activities with an 18-year career as an orchestral trumpeter before taking up an influential BBC post in 1942. He used a letterhead in the 1930s representing the famous Foden's Brass Quartet of gramophone and wireless fame. Now, the claim was justified because of broadcasts, concerts and records. This was the most familiar small British ensemble of the day. Now, as well as Harry's orchestral playing, his brother Alex, on the left there, he was soon a tubist in the Halley Orchestra, then the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestras. As well as this, the gentleman standing in the middle is their father, Fred Mortimer, conductor and trainer of Foden's, and the quartet was trained and conducted by him. Now, that was the custom, including the 1914 Foden's record, the BBC broadcasts, etc. Now, in this case, I think it raises a lot of issues about performance practice. Now, in this branch of music making, customers were very slow to change, and indeed, repertory did not significantly change despite endeavours in the 40s and the 50s by Dennis Wright, by Arthur Drake Rimmer, that was William Rimmer's nephew, and other figures. Now, following the advent of small groupings of orchestral brass instruments played by orchestral players in the 50s, the Philip Jones Ensemble and other groups, BBC transmissions diminished rapidly. But the environment of the contest, the brass quartet survived as an independent branch. Now, Concordia, selections from Weber's Preciosa and Freischütz continued to be benchmarks until the 60s, and we will then demonstrate aspects of a type of contest genre that prevailed. And here is a part, here's the first cornet part of Preciosa, a lot of notes packed into one page. Now, I shall join the others, and I'll talk a little bit about, just 2 or 3 little excerpts before I return here. But first of all, I'm going to be involved in playing the initial bolero. You can imagine that this tests the player's ability to triple tongue and play rapid triplet scalic passages. Now, the next extract I've designated with the word tacet. I don't think we need to play it. Our esteemed colleague in the Philharmonia Orchestra, David Mason, famous trumpeter, he always said, tacet is the finest word in the English language. And I believe that we've demonstrated those aspects of tone and ensemble and balance and control that are so much a part of brass band playing, you know. Now there's another odd brass band thing. In Preciosa and many other pieces, William Rimmer, he adds cadenzas to link sections, and here's a little cadenza on the euphonium from Paul. See, that's very wonderful playing, and it's quite flashy, and it demonstrates the soloistic abilities. But really, whereas the Cyfarthfa band and Besses of the Barn produced a lot of virtuosic music for their own uses, you know, Rimmer adhered to Harry Round's principles of fastidious scoring for widespread publication. He mostly scored in comfortable tessitura. Listen to the conclusion of Preciosa, firmly in the middle register. So Rimmer, he was very wise. He wrote music of a nature which could be very impressive, but the players usually could come off the stage at the end of the performance really feeling good. Now, this type of repertoire, it was a staple, really, until about the 1960s, when Gilbert Winter arrived and wrote 3 popular compositions. That was the time when things moved on, really, in the brass bands. But many subsequent composers who contributed significantly to full band repertory from the 60s, I can name Malcolm Arnold, Derek Bourgeois, Edward Gregson, Elgar Howarth, and John McCabe, almost exclusively wrote their brass chamber music for orchestral brass. For these reasons, the brass band quartet never became a serious artistic force to a wider musical public. Nonetheless, brass band quartet contests continued to be held at local, regional, and national levels. In 1944, Morris Motor Band near Oxford instigated a national quartet contest that continued to 1981. Now, an official British Open Quartet Solo and Junior Championship was established also in 1988. A Swiss Quartet and Solo Championship based on this model was founded in 1974 by Marcus Bach and was held in this country just a couple of weeks ago. In a way, to close the circle, I'll go back to Foden's again. Foden's band continues to this day to maintain its dedication to brass chamber music as well as solo skills. Foden's solo duet and quartet contest in Sandbach, Cheshire was launched as recently as 2011 and attracts international interest. So thank you. I'm going to leave it there.